before we open it up to questions, there's actually one thing that I wanted to walk through very quickly. And this was something that was brought up in our Slack workspace, the Military Trailblazer Office Hours Slack workspace. Somebody had asked a question, and it was a really cool answer, and it was something that ended up derailing the rest of my day because I ended up creating a whole bunch of these things. So I did want to walk through this just very quickly in case you were not aware of this functionality. So let me do this. Let me get my screen ready to share, and I'll show you what I am talking about. Okay, so there is a functionality. Actually, hold on. Let me walking and chewing gum here. Let me delete what I got here, and let me share my screen, and we'll show you what we're doing. Okay, so within Salesforce, you have the ability to create formula fields, right? So if I were to share my screen here, let's just say, and you can see my trail emoji guy there, so I kind of jumped ahead, but let's just say that we wanted to add an image onto our layout here on the opportunity layout, right? So what I can do, I can go into, actually, let me step back here, step at a time. So I can go to the gear icon, and I can go to edit object. That'll take me into the opportunity object and setup. And then from here, I can actually create a field, right? So I'm going to go and create a new field, and we're going to call this sum image, right? It's going to be a formula field, and we'll call this sum image, and I'm going to create the type as text. And I just realized, Steve Sanders, did I make you co-host? I don't think I did. So I'm going to, if you stop moving around the list, make you co-host. You can let people in. There we go. Okay, there we go. All right, so we're in the formula builder here on opportunities. Now, what you'll notice is that if you go over to the functions on the right side, there's a text option, and you get all the different text formulas and functions that you can work with. One of them is image. Okay, so I'm going to click on insert selected function. So what this will tell you, when you add functions into the builder here, you'll see that it'll have the different things you have to provide. So in this case, we need a URL. We can provide alternate text. And then when you see something here in brackets, that just tells you that those things are optional. All right, so we'll just keep that in mind here. Now, before the call, what I did was I went into my files and I uploaded an image, right? So in this case, this was one of my trail emojis that I was playing with back at like Dreamforce 2019. That was like all the rage at the time. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to right click on this guy and I'm going to copy image link, okay? And I'm going to go back into our formula here and I'm going to use that for my image URL. All right, now the URL, you have to put it in double quotes, right? So I'm just going to add my quotes there, paste in this giant URL that it gave me. And the other thing to keep in mind here is whenever you're using URLs and formulas, if it's a URL from the org that you're working in, you don't need this first part here. All right, so you can go all the way up to force.com and you can delete that. And you just need that /. You can use it what they call a relative URL, right? So if it's in this org, it's going to automatically add on that HTTPS and all that up to .com for you. All right. Now for the alternate text, I'm going to put in here trail emoji. I don't even know if that's how you spell it, but whatever. Right. So we'll go with that. So with that, I'm going to click next. I'm going to go through all the steps, of creating a new field. We're going to add field level security. I'm going to add it to all my layouts. I'm going to click save. And then before we actually go to see if that worked, I'm going to go into the image again. And we're just going to tee it up so that we can make some changes and we can quick save and all that good stuff. All right, so it's ready to go here. Now, if I go back to our Salesforce and I go to the opportunity page, you can see if I go to my opportunity and give this a refresh, hopefully we'll see our image will be displayed on the opportunity layout. And there it is. All right, now, again, I'm working towards the actual part that's going to help you within your Salesforce work. You see this giant image here. Now, you think back to that formula or the function that we're using, the image function, we can actually add height and width parameters. Those were optional parameters that we didn't include. So I'm just going to go ahead and put 30 by 30, and we're going to do a quick save, and hopefully that'll tame it down a little bit here. So if we go back to our page, I'm going to refresh, and we can now see that it is a much more manageable little trail emoji sitting on the page. All right, now to the actual part where it's going to be useful for you within your Salesforce work. Out of the box, Salesforce has a couple images that they include just, it's just there. You don't have to upload them. They're just available for you to use anytime. And one of those images is a little square, right? So if I actually go in here, and I can provide the reference that'll show you what are the out-of-the-box images, but there's actually an image called colorgreen.gif. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to change this to call this just green. All right, and again, we'll keep it 30 by 30, and I'm going to quick save now. And if I go and I look at that that image now, it's just going to be a green square, right? So you can see that little green box. Now, where this is actually useful, if you can imagine that we have here, I'm going to copy this formula and we'll pull it over into our demo work here. If you can imagine that Salesforce will render and actually bring you back to the opportunity formula that you were working with. You can see we have our sum image here. So instead of just displaying a green square, what if we displayed a bunch of green squares and maybe a bunch of other squares? And when you put them all together, maybe it would actually mean something, right? So in this case, what I'm going to do is I'm going to look at my opportunity probability, and I'm going to say, take the probability, multiply that by 100, and that I'm going to use that for the height of this. Or actually, I think this is the width if I look at it. And then I'm going to display another image. In this case, I'm going to do yellow squares, and I'm going to do 1 minus the probability times 100, right? So what this will do then is, if I do a quick save here, hopefully that'll go through. And if we jump back to our opportunity now, what that's going to give us is green square of some length and yellow square of some length, and it's all going to be based on the opportunity probability. So right now I'm looking at 100% probability. It's going to show me just green, but if I were to change this to 45 and save, it's going to update that. And now you have like a, what do you call it? I lost the word now. Like an image that'll actually display like a bar chart type thing. If I'm reading Megan's lips here of
like a progress bar.
Yeah, progress bar. That's the word. Thank you, Dom. That's
thermometer.
There you go. And the cool thing is, because this is a formula field, you can display it anywhere that you can display any other kind of formula field. So if I go here to select things to display, I can put the poorly named sum image onto this list view. And now I have a whole bunch of progress bars reflecting the probability of these opportunities, right? So you think about it, any percent field that you have in Salesforce, in theory, you can create a formula field based on that percentage that will display that little progress bar / thermometer / bar chart that we have here, right? So yeah, kind of a cool way to use these built-in images and, based on some kind of percent field to give you a progress bar. So kind of cool. So what I'll do is I'll copy that. I'll throw that into the chat. And then if anybody wants to
Bill,
waste the rest of their day, you can do that. Yeah, what do you got, Tom?
Let me ask you the imminent next question. Anytime, this is a warning for all admins, developers, right? As your org. As soon as you create something awesome, here comes the next awesome improvement request. Is there a way to add 3 colors to it?
Yeah. So out of the box, Salesforce has some very basic images that you can leverage, like color green, which is a square. They have stars and things like that you can use. But they're very limited in what they actually provide out of the box. So what you can do is you can take any image that you want of any colors. Let's just say you have the whole plethora of rainbow colors that you want to upload for squares. And then instead of referencing that image / sample / color green, you would reference whatever your image is. Just like I did with that trail emoji, you could reference whatever square that you have and then, use those. So yeah, you can upload any kind of image that you like, whatever color that you like.
What about if you need to make it public? Would you have to do the public link if you get it on an experience site?
I have absolutely no idea how we would display this through Experience Cloud. I don't think that you would, because I feel like I'm going to say I don't know. The fact that we're referencing an image, I think that might actually be taken into account in addition to the security of the formula field itself. But I don't know. That's a great thing that can be tested. Not sure. And I just sent this to Steve Sanders directly. I didn't send it to everybody in the meeting. So let me actually paste it to everybody now. There you go. Well, cool. Well, any other questions on that? Otherwise, we'll open it up to questions from the group.
I did want to piggyback on that. We implemented progress bars at our company as well, after some intense Googling. And the one thing that we ran into, they're awesome in the system and on dashboards and on list views and when you're reviewing reports in the system, but whenever you export them, they don't show up.
Yeah, it doesn't work.
That's
great point. Something to keep in mind. I'm trying to think too. I think just report exports in general. So in this case, with images in a formula field, you're definitely going to run into issues there. Even just, I'm trying to think, like if you're using other functions like hyperlinks, where you want to create some text, do a bunch of if statements, and then figure out how you want the text to display with a URL. Even those, when you export them, it gives you some really ugly text instead of the actual thing that you want to see, like the URL. But that's a great point. Thanks. All right. Any other questions on that before we go to our first raised hand for the day? Okay. Sandy, what do you got?
Hi. So process builder. I seem to be having an issue. And since most of my Salesforce experience has been after they really encouraged all the flows and all that kind of stuff. So I never really learned it as well. So first question regarding it is the only way to test is to really activate it and then create a thing and see if it works or not? Like, how do you troubleshoot, like within it, what is working or what isn't working?
Yeah, good question. So what Sandy is referring to, when you go into Flow, for example, this is kind of the current standard declarative automation tool within Salesforce. And if we go into any one of our flows that we're working on, what you'll notice is that we have the ability to either run the flow directly here, or you can do debug, and it'll actually walk through the steps. And you can even set it to say, debug, go through all the steps, but don't commit anything into the database. We're just testing right now, right? That debug link right there. I don't believe that there is an equivalent on Process Builder, right? So if we were to go back into setup and we go to our process, we type in the word process in our quick find, we'll go to the old school Process Builder. And I don't even think I have any processes in here. If we don't, we can create one real quick. Let's see. So if we go to new, and it'll kind of yell at you like, what are you doing? This is not the new school thing. So if we go to continue to Process Builder, give it a name, just test, record changes, save. Yeah, you'll notice that in here, there is no test option or run option. You essentially, if you want to test that this is working, you activate it and then you run your manual test and confirm that it's working. Yeah.
So
I think that's.
then how do you, if it's got multiple elements, how do you troubleshoot where it's broken if it's not working?
Yeah.
Yeah,
that's kind of the challenge.
Yes. So the weird situation I have is, I know I brought it before where we talked about the row lock error. We were having that issue with this. So our solution was to remove a lookup field and replace it with a text field or something like that on cases. And they have like 25 case assignment rules. And then they have the process builder that also does some of that as well. And it sets a bunch of stuff. And that has like probably 20 decision elements in there.
Yeah.
And the reason they do that is because one of the fields that I was changing doesn't get set until it goes to the process builder, which is then one of the things that they use to help kind of determine additional case assignments.
Yeah.
So I went in, I did start trying to do that whole, where is this field used, to make sure that I'm updating everything, because I'm doing the basic fix first, just to make sure that the flows are running. And then later we're going to then do a better upgrade of kind of diving into that process builder, converting it to flow seeing what really needs to be done and what doesn't. But the weird thing is we deployed it, the error stopped happening, but now case assignments are not being done correctly. The first question I had was the fact that one of the case assignments it was hitting, it doesn't even actually meet that criteria. So that confused me. But I've actually narrowed it down to the fact that it's either the fact that I tried to upgrade the API for the process builder that it runs on, or I also noticed that there's a couple of formula fields in the process builder where rather than when it's doing like the related field kind of thing where you're going from one record to another, rather than -R, it's doing -C, then the next object, -C, the next object. But it works in the older process builder when it's that way. And those are the three things that I'm really confused about.
Yeah. I'm curious. So you need the automation that's currently in the process builder to run before the assignment rules go?
No, it doesn't matter, because basically what happens is the process builder, if it does get assigned differently, the process builder will reset it to the correct thing. So ultimately, just the assignment rule thing confused me, and I don't know why it's doing that, but I don't think that I need to worry about solving for that now. What I couldn't figure out is why the process builder, why the one decision that should be reading all that information in the case, and it's all set there correctly, why it wouldn't be actually reassigning it to them the correct case queue. And I've done a couple of tests in the sandbox right now, and it's like I said, the two things that I have found is that there is a formula field earlier on before it even hits that particular decision element where the formula is going from one related object to another using a -C rather than a -R. Which but if I look at the process builder that works, that's the way it was. So it wasn't me that did that.
Yeah.
So if I go to the old process builder, but then when I took like the newer version and downgraded it back down to a different API, it started working. So
yeah, I'm not sure about the API version. That's something we can look into, but I'm wondering, is there an option where you take this process builder that is not behaving as you would expect it to, migrate it to Flow, activate the Flow, deactivate the process builder, and then leverage some of that debugging functionality within Flow?
that was actually how I discovered the related formula issue. However, even when I upgraded all of those, it still was not assigning it correctly. And I don't know why, because literally the only thing I changed was this one, there's one, and I did it everywhere because I went through it very carefully. Yeah, I even tried, because I did do that conversion, and the harder part about that, of course, is the way that they name everything. But
what about the I don't know if this changed in any particular API, but I wonder, is there any kind of order of operations thing that you have to be concerned with here? In other words, like if process builder and after trigger, well, that's the question. When you do this flow, is the flow running in the before or the after context?
it's after.
It's after. Because I was pulling up here, let's just take a quick look here. And again, I don't know if this will be, this would solve your issue, but looking at the triggers and order of execution, the first thing I was looking for was the assignment rules, which seems to be here. So it does the assignment rule, and then somewhere down below, record triggered flows that are configured to run in the after context. So it's doing the assignment rule, and then it's doing the after triggered flows.
Right.
And I was just wondering if it was a before triggered flow, would that update the fields you need, make sure it's got the appropriate thing set, and then it will go through the assignments?
No, it's too complicated of a flow to be able to make it a before save, because I think it updates other things too.
Okay. Stephen Trumbull, you had mentioned something about recursion in the process builder. What are your thoughts there, Stephen?
Yeah, I was just thinking because process builder, you can have the recursion set up so it'll like run through up to 5 times at like different loops. So if you're having different values saved at different points in the process, your process builder can keep going, whereas your flow is only going to run a single time. So that's another difference between the two. It's like a checkbox in your start criteria on your process builder.
There's something to consider there.
In the start criteria, you said?
Yeah, from memory, it'd be like in advanced, a little drop down thing, and then it'll be like a yes, like allow recursion, don't allow recursion or something.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Sandy, I think just based on the complexity of this one, this might be one that we have to.
Right. Right. And then because it is for a client, I don't really want to share to.
Yeah.
'Cause all the information you shared earlier is definitely a recording that should be shared with people.
Was that recursion checkbox checked in this process
No.
builder?
It's not. But one of the other things I really don't like about this process builder, that when I was running like debug logs during it and stuff like that, is because it has so it's got that decision element, and then when it goes to the immediate action, if it's for everything that it's updating, it runs the validation rules, and then it would run the roll-up helper, and then it would go to the next thing it needed to update and run it again. So, and then, like I said, there's probably about 20 or so decision elements in this process. And then I know that there's a lot of stuff in here that's redundant, which is why I know it. And I need, eventually we need to revisit it, but it was just, those two things were kind of weird. Is one, the fact that there was a formula that was like, it was basically, it would be like, opportunity _C dot account _C dot, whatever. And I'm like,
Yeah.
how is that a thing? And then other things were correct. So I'm like, so how is it working properly with that going on?
Yeah. I'm not really sure, but like I said, if you want to schedule a time, we're offline, unrecorded, where you can share, we could walk through it. Happy to do so. But my gut tells me that, these kind of things, it's very easy to get into like a scope creep here. I'm currently going through that right now within my own application for one of the features that we're building or defects that we're addressing, where you say, okay, I just need to fix this one little thing. And then it's like, well, do I need to take a step back and just re-engineer this entire process builder and get it to, clean it up a little bit, remove some of those redundancies, migrate it to flow, take some stuff that could be before, put it in before, split it up with the stuff that could be after. I feel like sometimes you almost have to do that just to,
Well, like I said, our initial thing was to try to solve for the fact that cases were not being created, to kind of take care of that first and then kind of revisit it after the fact, especially since, we've got limited time each month with this client on trying to solve various solutions. So after, like, I have a mural document where I tried to path things out and all the things that were related and all of that kind of stuff. And it is such a mess that there is no way that it can be done quickly. So that was why I'm like, okay, what's the quick fix first?
Yeah.
And then when they give us the permission to go back and really do a good fix.
Well, just curious, in this particular client case, was this complexity and a whole bunch of stuff that you guys put in place, or are you coming in after the fact and trying to help maintain it?
I think,
yeah.
No, I understand. I think some of it was us. I think some of it was them. I think part of it is also as they kept increasing automation and aspects of stuff that, they give us like a set period of time to work on something. And sometimes it's easier just to add on than it is to kind of go back and double check everything else that you already have.
Yeah, the reason why I asked it is obviously if this was stuff that was put in place before your time, meaning like before your company was engaged with the client, or it was stuff that was put in place by you, but it was in a time period before flows and before, before triggered flows and things like that,
Yep.
You might be able to go back to them and say, hey, listen, best practice here, we're trying to make sure that this is scalable and it's not gonna blow up at some point. We really need to take some time to re-engineer this and, give them all the justification, and maybe that would help. But if it was something that you guys put in place and like recently, then that's a little bit harder of a sell. Like, hey, you paid us to do all this work. We did it like this way. Now we need to go back and redo it all. That's a little bit harder of a sell.
No, it's because some stuff is just older, and then, adding complexities through the years, and
Yeah.
that their internal admin is lazy.
Yeah. Okay.
So,
Well, like I said, happy to schedule a time offline if you'd like to go through it together.
sure. Because I mean, some of it, even if I do figure out like how to fix it, there are other aspects that I just don't understand that I would like to understand as well.
Yeah. All right. Well, my apologies that we can't give you a definitive answer on this one.
I appreciate it anyway.
Yeah. All right, cool. Well, any other questions on this particular topic or otherwise? If anybody has anything that they would like to go through, go ahead and raise your hand or speak up. Any questions? All right, so we'll open up in general then. Anybody have any other topics that they would like to go through? No questions? Really?
I was going to add though, sometimes you can create a field to capture like cross field reference with a line break just to see what's getting populated. Like if you had a formula here or there or whatever, I'm not sure if that could be used. I did that recently with a formula to just see what's getting populated. So I don't have to look around the org to find the answer, but it's getting populated in a field. Like if something is changing, so you capture it right there on the record itself or in a report, and then you can debug that way. But I think in general, what Bill is saying is the more complex it is, the more it's going to be harder to debug, in fact. And so to break it up and re-engineer is probably the best way and make it into smaller pieces, because there could be recursion going on, as Stephen is saying, updating something else, and it's updating it, again, over and over again. So to follow that logic is a bit hard, especially in Process Builder.
Right, which is one of the reasons why because basically it was essentially a lookup field and it kept getting reset. So when it was first created, there was automation that was setting this lookup field, and then it would hit the Process Builder, and one of the decision elements would set it, and then the next one would set it again. And then so basically it kept happening within this as well, which is why and then the fact that there's so many things looking up to that lookup, to that specific record as well, that's why we're like, okay, if we remove that aspect of it, that should at least fix part of it. But yes, overall, it definitely needs to be re-engineered.
Yeah, there's just too much automation and then going back and forth, and there's one doing one thing, and then there is that order of execution as well. So all of those things play into it, and you also have to map it out and see what's happening.
So Julie, that's a great point. And one thing that I'd add to that as well, that I really like what you mentioned there, is taking some of the complexity out potentially and putting it into a formula field. So building automation, for example, if we were building a schedule triggered flow where every night we wanted to like blast out and update, a couple hundred account records, I always get a little nervous, like that I got my start criteria correct and I'm getting the correct accounts. I start to worry, like, okay, is it really going to run for those 200 or is it going to run for like 20,000, right? So taking the criteria that you put into your flow in that start block and actually just putting that same exact criteria into a formula field where you can run a report or look at a list view of the records that will be impacted when that flow runs, verify everything looks good. And then instead of rebuilding that criteria in your start block, just use the formula field. So like, create a formula that's a formula of Boolean or checkbox and says like, should be run from flow. You can verify it in your reports. And then if it's good, then you just go into your start block and say, should be run for flow equals true, right? So that's it. That's one way that you could take some of the complexity from the automation, whether it's Process Builder or Flow, put it into a formula field, and you can kind of troubleshoot that piece of it, make sure that's working, and then just, add that into the flow. So I like that idea. That's one thing that I've used quite a bit, specifically whenever you have something that's going to run on a large volume of data. The other thing, Sandy, I wanted to point out that I kind of shrugged when you said, like, how would you troubleshoot the process builder? And what branch is it going and why? I kind of shrugged to say, well, you can't really do that, but you kind of can. Have you tried debug logs to try to look to see, to kind of follow the path of what's going on in the log?
I did, and I could figure out when it was at a particular decision, like it would have that information, but then it would have a bunch, like this whole string of like numbers, and then it would say false, false. And I'm like, I don't know what that means.
Yeah. Well, there's a couple of things with the debug logs, and it's kind of hard to demonstrate this, but I think it's something that I'll try to come up with a use case where I can actually demonstrate this on a call. But one of the things is there's a perspective manager within the developer console where by default, when you run it, it's got like mostly like the code based and just the text log. And then there's like another one that you can turn on where it'll actually show you like where in the logic it is, like apex, flow, triggers, flow. And you can actually see potentially if there is that recursion going on, you'll be able to see it bouncing back and forth between the different things. So that's something that we could look at as well when we troubleshoot that. And again, I'll try to come up with an example where I can show everybody on the call how to do that. Yeah, let me know if that's something you'd like to walk through.
Sure.
Okay.
And process builder still exists in probably a lot of orgs, so knowing how to do it even as a new person is definitely a good skill to have.
Yeah, agreed. All right, so I'll add that to my list for the first topic in a future call to go through that. All right, so let's open it back up then. Any other questions or topics that anyone would like to go through? And if nobody raised,
To
go ahead, Caitlin.
shout out to you, Bill. Thank you for recommending the DLRS solution. We took that and ran with it, and it has made our lives a million times easier. So thank you.
Gail, it's amazing that you said that, because I was about to say, if nobody has any questions, I was going to go through the installation of DLRS so that people can start getting their hands on that. So that's a great segue. Now, before I go down that rabbit hole, does anybody have any other topics that they would like to go through before we jump into DLRS? Okay, hearing none. All right, so what I'm going to do, I'm going to share my screen, and let me pull up this page. Okay, so for those of you that are not familiar with DLRS, this is a tool that kind of gets around one of the, I don't want to say major limitations of the Salesforce platform, but I'll say it. It gets around one of the major limitations of the Salesforce platform that people have been asking for like 20 years, right? So when you think about being able to roll up data, you want to create a roll-up summary field in Salesforce. So if I were to go in here and take a look at the account object, right? And I want to roll up, let's just say that we have projects that are related to the account object. The only way that I can create a roll-up summary field that would give me rolled up information about the projects is if I had a master detail relationship. Well, master details are not always practical when you're creating your relationships. So if you wanted to create a roll-up summary for something that's not related to a master detail, you're kind of out of luck with the out-of-the-box Salesforce functionality. There is a tool, and here, if I jump over here, this is a community-supported tool that basically gives you roll-up functionality for any relationship types. To take it a step further, one of the other limitations of the out-of-the-box roll-up summary fields is that you can't leverage date-based formulas. So in other words, if you wanted to create a roll-up summary that said, give me the total amount of my opportunities where the close date is less than today, you can't create that roll-up summary. It's going to yell at you and say you can't do that. DLRS will let you do that. All right. Now, if you go to here, let me I'll copy this and I'll throw this into the chat as well, so that everybody has it. A couple of things you'll notice. This will be the weirdest installation that you've ever done in a Salesforce work. It's not through the App Exchange. It's not through the standard package link. It's like this weird process that I have no idea how they did this. But it's open source, so if you care, you can actually look and figure it out. But if you were to click on Install DLRS, it's going to say Login to Install. And this is where it gets weird because I'm using a Trailhead Playground right now. Let me see if I can grab this custom URL. Let's see if that'll help me. So if I do like that, okay, that doesn't work. Let's go back. What if we just did install in production? Production or developer work? It's probably going to ask me to log in. And it's probably not going to get the session that I have here for our playground. Okay, so I could go through the whole process of resetting my password, logging into our playground, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to cheat a little bit. And I'm just going to go into my production org after, of course, I close all of my secret squirrel stuff here. So let's do that. Okay, close everything. And let's go to this. Okay, so let me reshare. So once you go through the installation steps, you're going to have DLRS installed within your org. It's going to give you an app through your app launcher called Declarative Lookup Rollup Summaries that you can go to, and it's got all the key tabs that you need to worry about. And the main thing where you're going to start is going to be on this Manage Lookup Rollup Summaries. Okay, so this is where you can actually then define your rollups. So I actually have a few in here. So let's look at, which one can we look at? Okay, so let's look at this one here. So in this case, we have a roll up where we're trying to roll up information from cases to a parent order record, right? So again, that's a lookup relationship. So we're just trying to roll up total hours that we tracked on a case and get that up to a parent order. So basically all you're going to do, you're going to give it a name and an API name. And then you just kind of go through the steps top to bottom here. So you're going to identify what is the parent object. You're going to identify what's the child. So in our case, we have cases rolling up to the parent order object. You're going to identify what the relationship field name is. So we have a lookup field on case called order, and that's order _ C. And then down here, you actually get to define what the rollup is going to do. So we're going to try to aggregate this field. This contains the hours on the case. And we're going to try to put the total sum of this into this parent field on the order, right? And then you can actually tell it what calculation mode that you want to use, whether it's going to be real time. So think of that like a record triggered flow where it's like in real time, you save a record and it's going to immediately roll that up. You can schedule this to run nightly. So in the case where you have some kind of formula that's like less than today or this quarter or something like that, those typically aren't going to be real-time transactions. You're going to schedule those to run on a recurring basis, like nightly. It's going to reprocess those. You can actually tell it, do you want it to use system mode or do you want to take into account security of the users? Almost in every case, I use system mode. And yeah, once you save this, it actually has all the functionality in place where you can deploy the needed triggers and all that kind of stuff. And once you do that, you can activate it. Now, this is a horrible demonstration because I would like to do this from start to scratch or start to finish. I'd like to do it with actual objects and things like that might be relevant in your orgs. But I think a good first step is install the tool and try to create some rollups. And I think it's pretty amazing what you can do with this. So let me pause my share. Megan, you had a hand up?
Yeah. So when you were doing the user versus the system, is that kind of like reports and dashboards, like it's going to show like specifically to that user what they have access to, but then that wouldn't really take into consideration everything. It might not give you correct information, but if you're doing it for the system, then they're going to have access to other information, possibly that maybe they weren't supposed to have.
Yeah, I think this is more of like when you think about like flows or like triggers where you can run something in system context where it's going to have access to all the data, or you're going to run it into user where you only have an access to a portion of the data. I think depending on the use case, you might select one or the other. If you're talking about, on an account record, you need to get the totals of all the opportunities for that account that have ever occurred. You're going to want to run that in system mode. If you're trying to roll something up like, how much revenue have I as a user been responsible for, like all of my opportunities rolled up into, maybe that would be user context. I honestly don't know of a good use case for the user context.
Okay.
Like I said, I always use system context for rollups because otherwise you get weird partial data.
Yeah.
So, Dan, you had a question?
Yeah, this is really timely. I'm glad you're bringing this up. We had a situation with a client a few weeks ago, and I didn't know what a DLRS was until there was a problem, and now I know what it is, kind of.
Yeah.
But we had a flow, a screen flow, where the user could come in and put in various budget items, and that those items would create a summary of their own. Well, and then that item was a child of another one, which is a funding program versus a funding request. So the funding request items would roll up into the funding program totals for the whatever quarter. Now that was because that was a scheduled summary, not real time. That was causing an issue. So once we switched it over to real time, then we didn't have any more issues in the flow because it could calculate, and apparently the program would calculate in real time as well. But I guess I'm just trying to understand that functionality and why there was that rub between the two, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So I guess the kind of key thing to keep in mind is we can dig into this, at the developer level, but my understanding the way DLRS is actually working behind the scenes, whenever you make a change that is related to one of these roll-ups that you have, it actually uses like a queue model where it'll take the ID of the record that it needs to recalculate the roll up for it. It's going to add that onto the queue. And then once it's on the queue, there's something else that's going to pick that up and then actually process the roll up and go with it. Usually, in almost all the experience I have with DLRS, the issue is on the real-time triggers causing problems versus the scheduled, right? Because real-time, you can imagine that if you have, some roll up on an object that also has process builders and flows and triggers and all that other functionality running on it, adding another thing to that, you can imagine that might cause problems. Or even on the parent object where you're trying to do roll-ups and it's trying to do that in real time, that can cause problems. So switching that to scheduled sometimes gets you out of those like limits issues and recursive saves and all that weird stuff that we were talking about earlier. Why going to scheduled would cause a problem, I don't really know. What I can say is that the out-of-the-box, like real-time trigger or the out-of-the-box scheduled, sometimes if you're running into problems with that, there's another option in that in the settings there. Here, I'll share my screen. There's another option that's for the calculation time. Instead of real-time or instead of scheduled, there's a developer option here and a process builder option. This gives you a little bit more flexibility. So you can actually, instead of having it do the roll-up for you, maybe you add this into a flow where, if the appropriate things are changing, then you manually add that onto the queue for processing. And you can even do it in like the asynchronous block or the, do it 2 hours later, or whatever, all the stuff you can do within a flow, like time-wise, you just get a little bit more control over that. But yeah, that might be one of those where we'd have to take a look at it and kind of dig into it, like the specific use case.
Yeah. Thanks for bringing it up. Good stuff.
Yeah. Julia. Yeah.
So I had a use case where we're unwinding some historical information. So changing maybe record type or whatnot. Yeah. And currently the roll-up summary only allows for one criteria and criteria, not an or criteria. So does DLRS allow for that? Or what I've been doing right now is just creating another roll-up summary and I'm adding it together to get the sum, because I want to still create, I want to allow to keep the historical information, even though there's a name change, essentially what's happening. And then going forward, capture that into the sum.
Yeah, so to kind of, to unpack that a little bit. So the first thing, and here, let me get into, let's see if I can do this. Let me go to, we're going to go to, so for the criteria, yes, like, can you do more than one, like, and, or like you do like and or?
Right.
My understanding is that you can actually, you basically build your criteria just like you're doing it in SOCKWOL. So you could say this and that, and then in parentheses, this or this or this, and this or this. Like you can get pretty complex with the criteria. And again, that's another one of these things that you can take formula fields and leverage those as well, where you can build all that stuff in a formula field and then reference that as part of your criteria. Mm-hmm. But yeah, DLRS will allow you to do multiple ands and ors that you need. What is the current roll-up tool that you mentioned? Just you're talking about roll-up summary fields, like the out-of-the-box functionality?
Right. I just do 2 out of the box, and then I create another field and I sum them together as my
Yeah.
workaround.
Yeah, this would allow you to put to borrow a Star Trek phrase, infinite complexity or infinite diversity and infinite options, whatever the hell it is. Yeah, you could do like any number of ands or ors that you would like to do in there.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
What is that quote now? That's going to bug me for the rest of the day. Infinite diversity and infinite something. Yeah, I'll have to look. Any case, yes, DLRS. The other thing I should mention about that tool, when I first brought that up, I said community supported. You've probably heard of a lot of community supported tools over the years that don't have a very big community, and then they fall apart and they don't get updated. This is a very active community that's keeping this up to date. They have, weekly meetings, and there's a whole Slack workspace, and they look for volunteers. They have people that do just documentation, people that do just development. So it's definitely a tool that is supported that I would be comfortable putting into a client org if I was a consultant. And the other thing too is that it is open source community supported tool, so it's free. There's a lot of other kind of roll-up tools that are available, like on the App Exchange. I think Rollup Helper comes to mind, where it's freemium, where you get like 3 roll-ups, then you have to pay for anything beyond that. DLRS, completely free, completely open source. You can, do whatever you like with the source code, view it, copy it, all that good stuff. So, but yeah, sorry for a crappy demonstration. I'll have to actually figure out how to get this installed into a playground org, and then we can go from start, to finish. But yeah, if you haven't messed around with it, definitely take a look at that install page and get it installed into a sandbox or one of your dev orgs and give it a whirl. It's a pretty slick tool once you get working with it. All right. So that being said, any questions on DLRS or otherwise? We have about 5 minutes left.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Just like more of a general question. So I'm about to retire. I'm Salesforce certified. I'm doing a fellowship with a company, not in a Salesforce role. And part of this fellowship, it's a larger company, and I have the opportunity to kind of roam around different divisions and that sort. And without me even asking, they'll show what they're doing and a Salesforce system that they're using, and they'll mention something that they're frustrated that they can't do this. And I know for myself that it can be done. And it seems like there's a disconnect between the users of Salesforce and then the admin team, and the users don't know what to request, and the admin team doesn't know that that's how you need to use it. So they're not suggesting anything either. And I'm just wondering, is that a pretty normal thing? And if it is, how have you guys seen that be addressed at companies? And I'm in a sort of a position where I'm not in like a real position to say, well, you just have to do this and let me jump in there and do it. Like some things as simple as changing the name of a field, which is, obviously not all that difficult.
So I'll give you my take on this, and then we'll open it up for comments if anybody else has any thoughts here. But I think a couple of things that I kind of keep in mind whenever I'm going into a client org. Sometimes the Salesforce administrator, the person that's responsible for making those changes, might not be a Salesforce administrator. They might be the director of services that also has an added responsibility to do, to maintain Salesforce. So it might not be their full-time job, right? So that's one thing to consider. The other thing is that, a lot of times they'll put Salesforce in place, but they don't put all the other kind of plumbing in place to maintain it. So like, how do users submit feedback? How are requests queued up? Is there like a backlog that they maintain? And is there somebody dedicated there to actually maintain it and actually add this functionality? And then to your point, there's the users that are using the system are speaking one language, and then you might have like the admin team that might be part of like a development shop that's speaking a completely different language. And sometimes they need that person that's in between, right, to kind of translate between the two groups. So it really just depends on, kind of the structure of the organization, how they have things configured and set up, between the users and that kind of IT Salesforce admin team. But yeah, anybody else have any thoughts on kind of an approach or a thought there?
So I don't know if you've followed or met with Jade Long yet, but it's really funny that you bring that up because as I was like trying to finagle my way into the ecosystem, one of the things she pointed out was getting into a company that's utilizing Salesforce but may not be utilizing it to its full extent, and then make sure everybody in the company knows that I know Salesforce. Put it on my LinkedIn, talk to people about it, put yourself out there because you could somehow get your way to kind of laterally move over to that. Or in this case, it kind of sounds like you're looking at like more of a solutions position or a business analyst position, that translation part, right? Or Scrum Master, where you're getting the stakeholders and developers and the users on the same page with what they have right there, right? So it's a really good opportunity, it sounds like. Obviously, you don't want to step on anybody's toes, but without being like, hey, this is wrong, just be like, oh man, I remember like I was on Trailhead and I remember like if I did this, just something stupid, like, but put yourself in there without putting anybody down or like being like, this is really dumb. Like, who did this? You know what I mean? But that's Jade,
Yeah.
that was her first thing because I was interviewing with a lot of companies that use Salesforce, but I was doing it for jobs that weren't Salesforce. And that was her first thing. She's like, that's step number 2 to get in is find a company and then just make it known because then they'll reach out to you or they'll talk to you about it if you know it. Things like that.
Let me just 2 points here. It is 12:58. I do have a hard stop with a client at 1 o'clock, so I am going to hang up immediately at 1 o'clock to join another call. So I don't mean to cut anybody off if they have anything they want to say. But yeah, I think Ash, that figuring out who the person that maintains Salesforce is, and then using this as a networking opportunity to go to them and say, hey, I'm new here. I was working with these users. They mentioned this thing. I think just based on my experience that this is an easy thing to do in Salesforce. Like, what are your thoughts? Is that something that we could do, or is there any kind of blockers? In other words, like, don't say like this is dumb. This should be easy. We can do this right away, and turn it more into like, yeah, like, hey, this seems to be simple. Like, is this something we could do? And just use that as like a discussion, point.
Yeah.
So
Don't say what I'm about to say, which is this is an opportunity for rectal cranial extraction.
Yeah.
Because
Lindsay.
it really is. It's the people typically. The big mistake is, I'll wrap with this. So the problem with Salesforce is it's sold to executives who want every shiny whistle and button, and then they give it to IT as if IT and Salesforce are the same, and they're not. And then they expect your users to understand it immediately and understand because IT set it up and the executive wanted it, and the users, it's a total ignorance of the user experience and all those things. So you're in a challenge state. What a good idea not to call them stupid. I'll try that on my next project.
All right. I do need to run for this call. I did put the link to our Slack workspace. So if anybody has any questions or they want to follow up on anything that we discussed today, that's the best place to do it. Otherwise, hope everybody has a great weekend and we'll catch up next week. Thanks all.